I don't know if I meant to start right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that a minute early. Welcome, everyone, to the American Dream, the latest trends in sponsorship from the U.S. sports market, brought to you by our friends at Repucom, our sponsors for today. Thank you to all of our good friends over at Repucom. Joining me today on the stage are three gentlemen, three U.S. sports executives with long, distinguished careers in three different sports. To my left immediately is John Angelos. John's the EVP and Chief Operating Officer of the Baltimore Orioles. As well as serving as the EVP of the Orioles, John is also the Chief Operating Officer of the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, overseeing all of the network's business operations. For the past 15 years, Angelos has managed the day-to-day business operations of the Orioles, overseeing marketing, advertising, branding and promotion, major corporate partnership sales, ticket sales, governmental and public affairs, media and public relations, ballpark facility design and management, event operations, concessions, and rights negotiations. John, welcome today. Sitting next to, we'll give them a round of applause, welcome. They've all come a long way. They're very jet-lagged, so a round of applause might wake them up. Next is Mark Lamping, who's the president of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He joined the NFL franchise Jaguars in February of 2012. And the Jaguars will play one regular season home game each year at London's Wembley Stadium. I know everyone in this room is well aware of that fact. A veteran of more than 20 years as an executive in professional sports, his career highlights include 13 years as a marketing executive with Anheuser-Busch, 14 seasons as president of Major League Baseball's St. Louis Cardinals, and 4 years as CEO of the new Meadowlands Stadium Company in New York, where he oversaw the construction and operation of MetLife Stadium. Most recently, Mark joined the board of Fulham Football Club as a director. Welcome, Mark. Glad to have you with us this afternoon. And last, but by no means least, for those of you who will have heard him present here on past occasions, Scott O'Neill, in his new role as Chief Executive Officer of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's been the Chief Exec there since July of 2013, just this past summer. Previously, he served as president of MSG Sports at the Madison Square Garden Company, where he oversaw the business operations of the company's three professional sports teams, the Knicks, the Rangers, and the WNBA New York Liberty. He also served as president of TRU at Seralta Technologies and was senior vice president of the NBA's team business operations. So welcome, Scott. Glad to have you with us today as well. We had a conversation on the phone prior, and while the title of the session today was Trends in the Sponsorship Market, we've agreed to try to broaden it a bit and open it up a little bit more into issues that are facing sport and that these gentlemen are confronting on a day-to-day basis in three very different sports in the U.S. But before we get into specifically what you're facing in your own markets, because you all do represent three very different sport and you're sitting in front of an international audience, if you could take your team sport hat off for a second, give us an idea of the challenges and opportunities you all think exist for your various sports at a league level and the international opportunities that you think are out there. John, why don't we start with you in baseball and the opportunities you see out there?
Thanks, Tom. I think what I would say for baseball is that the challenge is engagement with the international market. Baseball does a tremendous job in the United States. It sells 80 million tickets into major league games and another 40 million to minor league games. But internationally, there's probably a lot of opportunity there. Baseball's got a lot of ties into the Caribbean and Central America, South America options, and a lot of upside in Asia, but the league is probably lagging a little bit behind. Not being present in the Olympics is a challenge for the league, something to be looked at as an opportunity. I think the international offices that the league have some growth or have a ways to go in terms of making the league as big or at least bigger internationally. And I think the league is working towards that.
So when you get together at an ownership level, baseball ownership level, and you talk about the growth of your business, does international come up as a key priority on the agenda, or are you mostly focused as a league on the domestic game?
No, it does come up. You know, the owners' meetings are quarterly, and at every meeting of the MLB owners, there's a segment without fail devoted to international, where the league office reports to the owners about how the league is doing in terms of the various revenue streams internationally. You know, I guess when you compare to, for instance, where the NBA is in terms of, say, in China, where they've been there longer and they have bigger offices, as an example, I think that's sort of the horizon for baseball in some countries at least.
Mark, the NFL obviously is focused a lot outside of the U.S., very much, I think, on this market in particular. What would you say the opportunities and challenges are for your league?
Well, if you're going to grow, and if you're committed to growing, you know, the NFL has done extremely well in the United States. You know, most metrics might suggest, whether it's viewership or franchise value or pretty much anything you look at, the NFL is pretty much at the top in the U.S. But if you want to grow, you need to find a way to expand, and it's right here in the U.K. And in fact, it was funny, you asked about the NFL owners meetings, and we had meetings yesterday in Washington, D.C., and it was like a watershed moment. The international presentation, instead of happening with like 5 minutes left in the meeting before it's to be adjourned, it was moved up a couple hours. So here in the UK, there was an announcement yesterday moving 3 regular season games here beginning next year. We're with Jacksonville. We're part of that experiment, which is, can you take a really low awareness franchise, which the Jaguars are, that has a very limited following in the UK, and by virtue of repeat appearances, and in our case 4 consecutive years, can you build a fan base, and can you grow to supporters? The growth of avid fans, NFL fans here in the UK, while it's still very, very small compared to the major sports here in the UK, it has grown very, very quickly. And you know, the NFL is very bullish on the UK, and you know, there's a lot of things that could happen over the next handful of years.
Scott, I should actually reference the fact that you and your ownership group have recently purchased an NHL franchise. So if I can get you to talk a bit about, the NBA obviously has a long history and a long track record of international growth and staffing offices and going after that opportunity. But maybe talk a little bit about that, but about the NHL as well.
All right, I'll start with the NHL. It's pretty interesting. The NHL has had success with bringing players over. That was kind of, I think, the first step. And primarily those players are concentrated kind of in Northern Europe and Eastern Europe. And so that's where the focus is being, that's where the attention is being driven. You know, from an American league to come over here, you look at television rights for one, your version of League Pass, so you can watch all the games digitally and terrestrially, sponsorship and events, and merchandise. I guess that's the whole business. And so as you look at that business, we think those are markets to focus on for the NHL. The NHL is really committed. It's a fun group. The commissioner, Gary Bettman's been there a long time. And he's kind of acutely focused on the, in particular, European market. And John Collins is the chief operating officer, who's been there for 6 or 7 years, and is a tremendous executive, formerly with the NFL. And so kind of he understands the landscape and the scope, and has been really aggressive and active and kind of reaching out and driving some change. We've seen pretty meaningful percentage growth, but you know, it's like when you start with $1 and double it, it's a really high percentage, but it's not really meaningful yet in terms of contributing to our businesses. And so we think over time we'll have some good progress. The NBA, I think the NBA they're the leaders. I think in terms of an American league and their international business. And it started 25 years ago, and that's the difference. Is like the NFL, they've been really successful here, has struggled trying to put a game on in China because you can't just go to China and do business. You know, and for the NBA, has put on several China games, but we've had an office there for 25 years, and so it's a very much a league that believes that you have to kind of live locally, be locally, staff locally, and integrate yourself into the community with which you want to do business. And so you'll see that whether it be in India or China or the UK, Brazil, wherever we are, we the NBA, has been very active. And I think that's kind of a lesson for all of us.
Scott described, John, the various business units that exist within sport. I think we all know that those are the areas that everyone's looking to drive revenue in. Getting to sponsorship, which is, I know, one of the things that we wanted to talk quite a bit about here. Can you define for us, what's the sales proposition with the Baltimore Orioles today? When you're out in the marketplace and you're talking to brands, how are you positioning yourself in your market, and how are you selling your partnerships today? And then at the end of that, maybe describe a little bit about how that's evolving for you, how that's changing, what you're having to do differently today than in the past.
Right. Well, we've sort of evolved into a relatively unique posture in the context of American sports, in that we've diversified into other areas. We started our own television network. We took our radio rights in-house. We've tried to get into as many businesses as it seemed made sense. in order to extend the brand. So when we then take those platforms to potential sponsors, the presentation really is a 360-degree sponsorship opportunity across a regional platform. So if we have a television network that covers 7 states in the Mid-Atlantic and is the 4th largest combined media market, and a radio network that parallels that, and then obviously digital opportunities on the network and team side, as well as the in-venue propositions, we try to go to everyone. Now, it doesn't work necessarily for everyone, but we go to everyone with the idea, participate with the team and the brands on all platforms for a fully integrated 360-degree proposition. So we're in a position where we can offer that, and where people can't take advantage of certain things or it's a budget issue, then we start to scale back or try and do something creative. But that's the ideal situation for us.
You've owned the team for over 20 years, about 20 years right now. Theoretically, you're going back full circle and approaching many of the same people that you would have spoken to over the course of the last 20 years, some successfully, some not. How does that conversation change over time? How do you walk into a partner that may have rejected the opportunity in the past, and how do you turn them around to what you're doing today? How does that sales process work for you?
You know, a lot of it is an education process. We had a rights holder agreement for many years with Comcast Sports Network, and as we transitioned out of that, it was letting people know, when you talk to us, you're not just talking now about a sign in the ballpark or a promotional or trademark opportunity. We have media. We have media on the TV side, the radio side, the digital side. That took a couple years to get that across, but the upside to that was it also got us in a lot of doors that we could never get in before. Suddenly you can get in through the ad agency door, who previously would say, oh, well, you're a team, we want to evaluate that a certain way. Once you're talking about multiple platforms, it's almost inevitable that you're going to get in almost any door in some particular way, using one or the other of those opportunities. So I think we've been able to talk to more people because we've become more integrated vertically and otherwise.
Mark, you've got a challenging market in Jacksonville. You've got 8 home games, a couple of preseason games. Nothing that you really are selling them is going to be inventory that shows up on live broadcast. What's your sales story? How are you selling a partnership with the Jags? And right. Focus again on how that's changing today versus what it may have been in the past.
Well, first, a little background. Jacksonville is one of the smallest markets that's has an NFL franchise. So we have unique challenges. The NFL is a great league in that it's sort of it's league first, team second. And while each and every NFL team benefits from a significant amount of distributed revenue, that each team receives the same amount, and we have a very good salary structure. Teams have to generate local revenue. It's becoming even more important today than it was in prior years. So our perspective is let's not lament about the fact we're one of the smaller markets. Let's try to figure out how we can use that to our advantage. So and some may perceive our weaknesses, we want to try to make them our strengths. So our discussion with sponsors are totally different. We're saying, look, the price of entry into our market is different than it would be if you're in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago. It's still the NFL. We have the ability to, because we're a very typical United States market. I mean, we're the 50th largest television market, and we're a very typical 50th. So in the traditional old consumer marketing test market days, Jacksonville was a perfect test market for consumer products. So we try to sell that to our sponsors, that here, come into our market, try those things that perhaps can be applied to other markets where you may be doing business. And we've tried to turn the sales proposition around a little bit and say, because we have to, let's not focus on this basket of assets you're going to purchase. Let's first, you tell us what metric it is that you're going to judge the success of your relationship with us. And then what we'll do is we'll let that basket of assets change. And we can do it game by game because we're fairly nimble. We have the ability to do that, even more so next year when we go totally digital inside the stadium in terms of our communication. So, we've taken what some people may perceive as a little bit of a weakness, and we've tried to turn it around to say, it's not that often that you can have a partnership in the NBA, in the NFL. You can do it at a price point that might work for you. View Jacksonville as sort of the laboratory, and have some learning that you can then apply elsewhere across the country. And we've had quite a bit of success with that. We've had good growth on the sponsorship side, which is a testament to the quality of people, but also sort of a little different way to look at it.
I want to come back to that piece you referenced, going digital throughout the stadium in a second. But Scott,
Sure. We have a very different approach. So I and I think that I'm not saying that ours is better, but in terms of the way, because you always look at all your unique aspects of anybody's market, and everybody has their own nuances in their market. But ours is very, very different approach. So we believe that we should be solution-driven, not asset-driven in our approach. And so it's a very consultative, kind of quote-unquote sell. I hate to even call it a sell. We very rarely hear the words no. We might choose not to agree just in terms of the price and value equations might not work. But for us, we consider ourselves an in-house agency, both digitally and traditional offline. And so our approach is to go in and ask a lot of questions. We get up as high as we can, and we spend a lot of time learning about their business. And I'm not talking about going to Wikipedia. I'm actually talking about doing real work and real homework. And not that there's anything wrong with Wikipedia, unless you're leaking classified information. We have a very much a category approach. So our approach is, first off, it's solutions versus assets. Secondly, it's very much category focused. What I found, I'm a recovering salesperson myself, so what I found about sellers like myself is we like relationships. Like what brings us happiness and joy and feeds our ego is the feedback and relationship. It can either be from the deal kill, or the hug after, or the check you get. Okay, it's one of the three gives you kind of your sense of self. And so to manage a sales organization for us is we like to take a category approach and take it out of the hands of the sales reps. And so we'll say, for example, gaming, they're finally kind of loosening up the gaming restrictions, online gaming in the state of New Jersey. The federal government has punted to the states, which is a huge opportunity. And you understand what's going on in Europe, and the UK is far more advanced than we can possibly even fathom. And so the online companies here, many of whom we've met with, like Betfair and Betfred and Party Poker and Party Stars, and those guys, they have to align with a kind of a casino in New Jersey, and so that's what they're going to do. So instead of going to one, because we had an offer from one, it was a lot of money, and the sales rep's like, great news, $1.5 million a year, let's do this deal. We're like, whoa. That's great. They came to you and called you and offered you $1.5 million. What the hell do you think that's worth? If someone comes to give you a check without you making a pitch, without you diving in, without you understanding their business, without you giving them a platform to drive their business, without understanding activation, without understanding the power of your database, without understanding the power of your market, and the first offer in is $1.5 million, I take that bet. Let's go see the market. And so it's a different approach, right? It's not like that desperate, I need this damn money, even though we all need it, because we need to survive, right? But having the discipline to say, okay, let's go. Let's check this market out. Let's go see everybody. Let's think of this as an auction. Let's ask the right questions. And every meeting we get smarter, every single meeting, because we start refining our pitch. And then by the time we actually go back around on the third or fourth meeting and actually have presentations and are delivering something, it's something of real value. And it's something different for everybody because everybody has a different way they do business. But a lot of the core assets seem to stay, or the solutions seem to stay the same.
Is that approach the same, sorry, just between New York and Philly? I mean, you've got a very different situation in Philly as you were describing, but in New York's a much bigger market. But is the approach the same for you, regardless of the size of your market? Do you think fundamentally it's the same opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia's still a sizable market. It's the fourth largest market in the U.S., so I wouldn't make the differential about market size, but I would make it about what we control. So in New Jersey, we control everything. We control the Prudential Center. It's the 8th highest grossing building in the world. It's in a great market with a lot of high-end demos. It's a great market. In Philly, we're tenants in a building, so we rent it. The folks that own the Flyers, the hockey team in Philadelphia, own the building. So we don't have the type of inventory that you would have, say, in Jacksonville or in Baltimore. And so for us, what our strategy is to go to the different, so we've gone to the aquarium, the zoo, the Dadville Regatta, which is a big 100-team crew race, the Flower Show, which is attended by 1 million people in town, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Mann Music Center, the stuff that doesn't mean anything to you, but kind of the institutions in and around, like the 100-year-old institutions in and around Philadelphia where Philadelphians go, and we're aligning with them. And so that gives us a platform then to go out and represent, we are Philadelphia. So, oh, you targeted women? Terrific. We can do that too through the Flower Show. And you'd never associate women and NBA basketball. It just wouldn't be your hardcore target. But we're trying to fill out and build out our demos so that we can take that approach.
Mark, I saw you trying to jump in. Did you have something you want to say? I should say, too, I'm not going to wait till the end. I will do questions at the end. If anybody has a question right now, we've got people with microphones around them. Does anyone have a question they want to ask right now? As we keep, yes, right here in the front. Can we get a microphone up to this gentleman here? Or why don't you just scream because we're in a small room.
Right.
Go ahead and speak loudly.
No, I think you guys made a good point about how your leagues are trying to become more global. Perhaps you have different leagues. You have different leagues here representing the U.S. market, but you don't have the MLS, which is football, soccer, however you want to call it. Then the first question, I guess, that I have is that a sign that MLS is still struggling to become a global league? Or is this because it's a total different scenario where you have soccer, football established all across the globe, and you don't have that established very well in the U.S. market? And second question is, do you have any advice that you could give to MLS that can make that successful?
Can I take it just a first step? You just have to understand the landscape is so different from certainly here and around the rest of the world. Hey, it's not snooker, by any means, but it's still the number 5 sport in the U.S. It's growing, I think, like a weed, and I think Don Garber, the commissioner, has done a spectacular job in building asset and franchise value from near zero. You go back 10 years ago, and you could argue that they were worth zero, to now they're $100 million, and you have organizations like Man City investing in a team in New York. They've got 3 teams and cities lined up for expansion. And I'd say the markets that have come on in the last 4 years have been a lot better than those that came on the 4 years before, which were better than those that came on the 4 years before. You've got a growing kind of supporter group that's pretty intense. You've got media outlets and markets actually paying media rights fees for the first time. So you've got a growing ticket sales, fan bases, and you've got merchandise starting to creep out into retail. And so while a run by the U.S. team, while it might seem unlikely to those of you in this room, to make the round of 16 would be a big boom for them, I think, but it's the first time in U.S. soccer history that it's not a necessary, it's a nice to have, not a have to have. And so I'm bullish on the prospects of Major League Soccer in the U.S. While we're starting to attract some players. We've got 4 players that we think are at the level that can play kind of premiership type level. But we are a long way away from giving them, I think, a seat at the table to talk about high level business from the team side. I think the league can do it right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure, by the way, I'm not sure why they're not represented here. I just think it was designed to keep the panel smaller. I think there's a strong recognition that the league is growing, and as Scott said, doing a great job.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the dynamic of sports in the United States that there's no question the best baseball in the entire world is played in the United States.
No,
The best football in the United States, American football is played in the United States. NBA is the best league in the MLS isn't. It's interesting. I mean, there's no question from somebody who would love to see the game grow, and a tremendous amount of respect for the leadership at the Soccer Federation, Sunil Gulati and Don Garber. I agree with you, does an unbelievable job, and how far they've come since the World Cup in 1994. But there's this huge participation base of soccer players in the U.S. It's like, this is just going to explode. It's like the baby boomers. They're going to come through, and it's going to change the world, and it hasn't. It's gone a long way, but it's
We'll talk about that a bit later because there's some good things happening, obviously, with NBC. I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to say that like Scott, I'm pretty bullish. Standing on the sidelines and watching other league, and with the caveat, we actually our group did look at a couple of MLS opportunities. And the fact that we don't own a team isn't because we don't think that they're growing assets. We think they are. The youth participation in soccer is obviously been growing for some time. We think the fact that they're building multi-purpose stadium venues that can be used for concerts and ancillary events is a good thing too for the business model. Obviously, the labor situation is ideal. One of the reasons, though, to Mark's point, that Major League Baseball plays the best baseball in the world is because we have a lot of players coming into the league from around the world. If you take out the Caribbeans, the Dominican players, the Latin players in general, and the Asian players, the league wouldn't be as good. And I think that's ultimately a challenge for MLS. Anecdotally, I can tell you, my nephew goes to a prep school in Connecticut, and he and his classmates talk a lot about the English Premier League. And they have a sense that the best players in the world play in the English Premier League. Again, that's anecdotal. I haven't done any market research. I think that is either an opportunity or a challenge for the MLS going forward as to how they will be perceived in the country where they are. But there's no question the league is exploding and has done a great job in terms of developing its brand.
Getting back to partnerships and sponsorship for a minute, even going back 2 rights cycles in the Premier League, there have been discussions about the possibility of taking additional rights that are currently controlled by the clubs and possibly putting them in a central pool and selling collective partnerships together. That was a discussion before I came here. I was part of that discussion when it happened more recently, and there's a variety of different schools of thought on that. Interestingly, the NBA was talking this past year about putting logos on the jerseys, and then the question quickly became, who sells it? Do the teams then go out and do that? Does the league do that? John, is that ever a topic of conversation at the baseball level? Has baseball ever talked about the division between a club controlling the 75-mile radius and handling only local and the league doing international? Has there been any push with any of your teams to begin to take some of those rights back, or that discussion changing at all?
Are you talking about in terms of sponsorship rights or media rights?
Sponsorship rights.
Well, with respect to opportunities like jerseys in particular, the league, MLB, has sort of gone through a couple of phases. The first phase was to sort of clean up and take back the rights. There were a lot of things going on 10 years ago where players were popping up, basically ambush marketing. Players were popping up with this logo, that logo. So the first step for the league was standardize. Amazingly, that's the case. That was the case. Yeah. So they've standardized that, and they're doing a much better job at the league level of going about and going category by category. And, in point of fact, whether it's catcher's equipment or batting gloves, shoes, certainly, those rights are being bargained between the league and the Players Association. The clubs are not participating locally. I don't know how robust those discussions are. Baseball is already incredibly decentralized. Specifically, I mean, baseball's sort of the inverse of the NFL, where in the NFL you're getting a check from the league for the majority of your revenues, and you're then generating, as Mark said, as much locally as you can. Baseball's sort of 70% local. We're generating 70% of our revenue locally, not including the sports network, which is a separate entity, and that's generating yet other revenue. And the league really is cutting us a check for television rights and licensing. But I don't know. I think the biggest question in the MLB is getting back to the teams the rights to proliferate their media content on digital platforms. Because there's been a stalemate in Major League Baseball. They're really sort of behind the times, essentially, where we're broadcasting all the Orioles and all the Nationals, 2 MLB teams, on television, radio, but we're not putting that content on the digital platform. That's going to probably change soon. The NBA and the NHL have moved towards releasing those rights back locally to the teams, and that's what will inevitably have to happen in baseball, because if you don't do that, you're leaving behind principally younger demographics who are going to those other screens for so much of their content. But sponsorship-wise, I don't know that that's really at the top of the priority list.
Mark, has logos on the jerseys come up at an NFL level recently, and where does everybody stand on that?
It has. I mean, and there are logos on practice jerseys at this point. If you look at the structure, the revenue structure of the NFL, television is king. The television right payments are very, very significant. The ratings are huge. It's defied the erosion in broadcast television ratings that you've seen pretty much across the board. And as you begin introducing other commercial messages within the broadcast itself, the concern would be, are you then diluting the value of what you're selling to the networks? And the NFL at this point is not going to get close to that.
Scott, it was close. It looked like it was potentially going to happen, and my understanding is that it was potentially that conflict between the team and league and who sells it that eventually led people to take a step back. What's your perspective on it from an NBA point of view?
Well, I'd certainly like the opportunity to sell it, and I don't think the league. It's a league asset the way our leagues are structured, but the teams are best set up to capture the value. So I think that's the key. Where my head keeps going in this whole discussion is, is just, is there an opportunity for the teams to own their jerseys, and so we can do our own kit deals. I think that's where there's enormous value that I think that we trade off by centralizing, and that there are all kinds of issues that would cause. I recognize that, but I think that's where the big pot of gold is. The jersey sponsors are talking about a patch. I mean, there's money there, 10 million, 8 million a year, something like that. But in terms of back up the Brinks truck and dump it, I think that's where there probably should be some attention.
How do you, all three of you, go about understanding and communicating with and potentially monetizing your global fan base? Because there will be fans of the Philadelphia 76ers in Southeast Asia. There'll be fans of the Jacksonville Jaguars here in the European continent. There'll be fans of Baltimore Orioles in Japan and Taiwan and other places. How are you able, or are you able, to, through whether it's a CRM system or through social media, how are you able to engage those fans in a conversation around your brands? Or is that really sort of fundamentally what you're not a part of with the league structure as it currently operates?
Well, in our case, we don't really have access. I mean, we have access to the information. Anybody can get to our website no matter where you are. So, having compelling content, unique content is really important. But in the NFL, which is a very, very centralized league, and it's more league think than
do they run does the league invest in and run a CRM system that captures data from the global fan base and then shares that back with the club? Or?
The league initiative, they almost have to walk before they run. The answer to that's no. The first step is how can the league figure out a way to do a better job of basically compiling all of the information each and every team has. And then at least now you have one database in terms of every NFL fan in the country that has bought tickets. Mm-hmm. That can be very powerful. And until you do that, it's sort of hard to go beyond that.
John, that would seem to be...
But it will come, that's for sure.
That would be a huge asset of baseball's, given if you're looking for positives on the structure of MLBAM, that potentially is one that you've controlled your own digital environment for a long time. Regardless of where people come into baseball through your digital world, globally, you have the ability to understand who they are and control it. Is that something that the league is operating a CRM database around and managing effectively and communicating back to the clubs?
I think the league in Major League Baseball has just begun in the last 3 years to do that. My impression of what the NBA and the NHL has done, and now I learned a little bit about the NFL from Mark's comment, is that in terms of best practices teams and sort of warehousing information and league-to-team cooperation, the NBA and the NHL, and Scott, you may have had a different experience, but at least viewing it from afar, has been more proactive. The Major League Baseball is now becoming more active in that. And, internationally, what the league is doing with that. I think baseball does have an incredible repository of customer information, principally because, as I mentioned, when you sell 120 million tickets, when you sell 80 million major league tickets, which is more than the other three leagues combined by far, you've got all this customer data. And obviously all that data all those transactions are going by the internet and are captured. And the league is providing all the customer data. So if the Yankees sell 10 million tickets, on the internet over a period of years, the Yankees get all that information, and so do we. What we do with it, we also use our television network to try and project content. We partner with music labels. We bring in artists to try and bring more and more demos who are non-core fans. Football's more season ticket oriented. You look at the Ravens in Baltimore, they won the World Championship last year. They'll sell 700,000 tickets, and probably, Mark, 95% of it's season tickets. We're really, we'll sell 2.7 million tickets in a season, but say 45% of it's season tickets, and then a big chunk is groups and individual. We get all that customer data. So I agree, there's a big opportunity. It's going to require more and more cooperation between the league and the individual clubs to really mine that. And it's got to be done, as Scott said, at the local level, especially in a decentralized league like baseball, where every team owns its own TV market, every team owns its marks, and every team is responsible for driving that brand in a way that a league office really can't. MLB is a great league office, and they're great league offices in these sports, in the NFL and the NBA and NHL. But you're either sort of running a team or you're running a league, and they're very, very different things. And you need the team to be able to talk to its fans. And I think all leagues go through that push-pull at different times.
Yeah, the NBA and NHL, they just send on a flash drive the fans that they touch, and you can only monetize them within your 75-mile radius of your city. So that's how it works. But it's a much the support system you get in the NBA, the clear leaders. It's a group that I worked in, and the message from the commissioner on throughout the league is that we are partners with the teams, which is really a unique perspective from leagues and teams, and it's our responsibility to help them communicate with each other. And while we fight to the death on the court, off the court, we're business partners. You know, we're kind of jointly own the league, so to speak. And so that mentality kind of shepherds through. They have a McKinsey-like group in the NBA that goes out and builds and talks through best practices, provides analytical and statistical data to help you make smarter decisions on pricing and whatever other decisions you might make, inventory controls, inventory pricing. You have kind of best practices data on promotions, all kind of cataloged online. It's a tremendous competitive advantage because if you remember, and we don't have NHL teams or NBA teams in either of these markets, but sometimes you think you're, at the Philadelphia 76ers, that we're competing against, pick a team, the Lakers, but we're more competitive against the Flyers, the Phillies, and the Eagles, the three other professional sports teams in Philadelphia, than we are against the Lakers or the Knicks or the Heat or the Bulls. And so the teams understand that, primarily in the NBA, more so than I think the other leagues, and it's driven, and it's kind of a rite of passage. You come into this league and you share and help each other. I think the NHL would be kind of a distant second, and I think they're aspirational. I think they do a really good job in the data analytics side in helping provide us some sophistication in pricing and analytics, but haven't made the decision to invest in a group that can actually help you drive your business.
Before I move on, I want to make sure we get to touch on some ticketing insights and some ticketing questions here. Any other questions on the partnership side? Yes, someone over here on the end. Can you say what your name is and who you're with before the question, please?
My name is Stuart Marcella. I'm with SuperSport United FC in South Africa. Other than you guys have touched on a couple of revenue streams, but I think the general ones would be broadcast, sponsorships, radio, tickets, merchandise. Are there any other form of revenue streams that people can look into, or that you guys are using? Is it just those that I've mentioned?
Are there any other
I'm
revenue?
infamous for saying, that this is the simplest business in the world, and it's not easy, but it's really simple. You sell tickets, suites, and sponsorships. You do a TV deal every 10 years and an arena deal every 20 years. And anything you focus on outside of those five is a distraction on the rest. There's some other little ancillaries like food and beverage and merchandise that you can make $1 million here or $2 million there. But at least the way we're restricted in our leagues to that 75-mile radius, we really have to focus on there. So the one thing I didn't hear you say was, I'd say suites, but I kind of brought that out to premium. And I think that at least the way we look at our business is we're always looking to segment our stadium, our arena, so that for each of the different prospective buyers, there's something for everybody. And so if you're a family of four and you don't have much money, we want to have a $10 seat to come to a game, and we'll probably package in some food. But you'll sit in the worst seats in the house, and it'll be a great experience, just a different one. If you want to spend, $10,000 for a game, we've got that experience for you too. You can come sit right on the floor, and you have a 5-star meal before the game, and you get a red carpet treatment, and you end up parking right next to the arena. And so, and kind of our opportunity is to find the kind of everything in the middle. Those two are really easy to find and to define and package and price. And it's kind of our job to kind of figure out each of the little nooks and crannies and where they go in the building and then how you go to market with them.
John, you talked when we were on the phone about really this question, which was if really all you had bought was a baseball team in Baltimore, you might have run it to its logical conclusion years ago, but actually what you realized was you bought a baseball team in a region, and in that region there was another baseball team, and if you owned the media rights for that and your own, you could build a media business. So even though it's a media business, it's not necessarily your own television deal. You've gone vertical within that media business.
Right, and I agree with Scott that you've got to stay true to your core competency. You've got to obviously field competitive teams. You've got to attract sales talent and do marketing and do all the things that we all know are central to operating a franchise. But the other revenue streams, I think, are in related or ancillary businesses, and being able to look at, depending on your market, you need certain critical thresholds, say, to do what we did in terms of launching our own regional sports network instead of selling those rights off to a media company. That's certainly the biggest opportunity, without question. You can line them all up, and as Scott said, $1 million or $2 million here, could be more than that, but nothing will ever compare to considering the opportunity to run your own or self-operate and create a related assets. You know, the Red Sox really pioneered that in baseball and in sports 20 plus years ago with New England Sports Network, where they said, look, we're not going to do a deal with a third-party rights holder. We're going to start our own network, create our own asset. The Yankees followed that some years later. Other networks, you now see a lot of independently owned. Well, there are very few independently owned. There's our network. There's the Ness in Boston. There's Altitude in Denver that's owned by the Cronkies. Most of the other networks have investments of different types by media entities. Outside of television rights, you can self-operate your radio if you think that makes sense. There's not a ton of money in that. That's really more like a marketing platform than probably anything else. But it does help to round out your sponsorship revenues, your premium revenues, things like that. Scott mentioned the concessions business. We looked at the concessions business and will continue to look at that, not so much because we think it creates a separate asset, which it does, and not so much because we think it brings additional income to the team, which it also does, but because it gives you the ability to control your fan experience in your venue. There are a lot of good concession food and beverage providers out there. They all do different levels of a good job and bring their own strengths and weaknesses. But there's always a price that we all evaluate. You know, when you outsource anything, you lose control. And depending on the deal you do, you're sitting across the table from somebody instead of on the same side or doing it yourself. When you outsource your parking, your food and beverage, all those things, like your media rights, you lose some control. And I think that's why you have to continue to look at that, you know, as well. There are other venue opportunities, team training centers, partnering with people in you know, youth training, youth sports, youth tournaments. There are those types of branding opportunities. But we definitely looked at it like we bought a brand, we bought content, and we were not just a baseball company. We were not just a sports company. We were an entertainment company and a content and branding company.
The NBA built a business in China and invested significantly for a 15-year period, and then went into that marketplace and sold a 10% valuation in NBA China and raised a couple $100 million, with the idea, I think, that they could take that money and put it against other types of businesses to begin to generate revenue as a league. My understanding is that money's not been spent anywhere, Scott. Is that an indication that once you get beyond your core business, the opportunities maybe aren't there? So you can raise the money, but trying to find those other places outside of the core business, broadcasting, and the things they're already doing just might not surface?
I think the ancillary businesses are terrific, and I think that I would, until I max out my opportunity, in U.S. sports, you can find your theoretical max like really quickly, so you know what your ticket max is, like you know where you can max out, you know kind of within kind of 10 to 15% where your sponsorship max is, you know like the equation on TV. I mean, you're either going to do it yourself or get a rights fee, but you're there. So once you start to approach that curve where you're getting closer and closer, you certainly have to figure out how to leverage it and build other businesses. In terms of the NBA, I'm just not well enough versed into how they did their deal and what they're doing.
You just a nice segue, Scott. Moving into ticketing a little bit. It's a big topic of conversation here. The secondary ticket market is beginning to shape up a little bit. John, baseball has had an experience in secondary ticketing. What's your perspective on the secondary ticketing market in the United States? What have you done well? What do you wish you could change? And what can we all learn from your move into that market, baseball's aggressive move into that market years ago?
Well, I think by virtue of Major League Baseball's aggressive push to create Major League Baseball Advanced Media as a separate entity to cover all of its digital and mobile and social media platforms, which was a good thing in many respects. That put baseball ahead of the curve in terms of, and really the seed money, if you back up a second, what made MLBAM go was the premise that by recapturing the ticket service charge money that was being recognized at the club levels and basically transferring that revenue from 30 individual buckets to one league bucket, you would right there have a business. You would be profitable from day one, and that would give you the opportunity to go forward and develop all the things that MLBAM has and really is certainly leading the U.S. and likely leading the world in many respects in terms of the backbone, the platform, the interactivity of it. That said, there are differing views among the clubs as to the role that partners like StubHub, and that was very controversial among certain teams, at least, as to what the letting the genie out of the bottle with respect to making Major League Baseball an official partner of a provider like StubHub, and essentially putting the stamp of approval on the secondary market, which not too long before it was called the secondary market was called obviously scalping. And you know, the world changed a lot, and I still think their teams, the Red Sox and Yankees, the bigger market teams in particular, have raised questions and said, well, you know, maybe I don't want to participate. The teams can opt in or opt out. Now they can opt in or opt out from a partner standpoint. As a practical reality, there's nothing a team can do to stop Yankee tickets from being transacted on StubHub or any particular platform on the internet, which I think from a net neutrality standpoint and all lots of other antitrust issues is a good thing. But from a marketing standpoint, a team can say, I don't want the StubHub money. They can say that to MLB. They can walk away, and they can start their own local or local market provider. The Red Sox had something I think called, may get this wrong, it's called, let's say, XYZ tickets, but for lack of knowing for sure what it was called. And that was the official partner in Boston or the New England area, and there was a relationship there. And they were, again, diversifying into another business. And I think they did it, again, for revenue opportunities and for branding and other scenarios into the future. But there is some differing view on that. I just, on balance, you know, you're not going to ever eliminate the secondary market. There is some question about where technology will take us and how you can have real-time selling of primary market tickets and secondary market tickets all in the same place, and how that will eventually work. Obviously, the secondary market is used by teams sometimes as a hedge and as a cash flow mechanism. Teams that are expected to do well but maybe don't think that they're going to do quite as well as the world thinks often off tickets or sell off tickets rather to brokers. And you know, there's some interplay there.
Mark, you opened a stadium in New York, and the difference between the old stadium and the new stadium in terms of ticket revenues was massive. What did you do there to achieve that?
Well, it's ensuring that, you know, as your customers' needs have evolved, that you have offerings that can meet those needs. And the NFL is a league that has been really dependent upon season ticket sales. You know, much more so than hockey, basketball, or Major League Baseball. But you know, that too is evolving and changing. And you know, as far as the secondary market is concerned, you know, those partners, you know, StubHub as an example, they play a very important role, because as far as your customer is concerned, it's totally transparent. And you know, for every season ticket holder you talk to, when you talk about the secondary market, this goes back years. The fact that the season ticket holder had a place that they could sell those most valued games helps season ticket sales. And I think that's the one thing that we have to be very careful of. How do you make sure that you work in a partnership with others that are really influencing the secondary market so much more than the teams might be? As far as MetLife Stadium was concerned, you know, it's just the commitment from both the Jets and the Giants to do everything they can to make sure they got a very wide product offering. And you know, as Scott said a few moments ago, it's not just, you know, the person that wants to buy the experience that only that person can buy, and you have that big group that says, you know, I want to go and I want to get in there as inexpensively as I can. How do you make sure that you add value to not only bring in an audience that maybe you would have trouble appealing to in the past, but more importantly, to be able to get people to step up a little bit in terms of average ticket price?
How do you make sure you don't go too far in that regard? When you're going out and pricing, Scott, when you went and redid the Garden, you talked about the average ticket price increase year on year was about 45%, and some 59, and some of it was higher, much higher, obviously, some much lower. How do you know when you do that, when you put those prices in the marketplace, that it's gonna be sustainable over time? How do you know you've found that right sweet spot in the market to raise the prices 59% year on year?
Right. Well, you have to do a lot of work, and so you understand. You certainly view the secondary market and what games are selling for and what the array is. You look at your historical renewal rates in specific sections and down to specific seats and rows. You look at kind of a competitive landscape in the market. I mean, you do a deep dive into understanding how, and then you have to make some projections as to how you think you'll sell. And I would say that the stronger your sales organization and the stronger your market and the stronger the demand, the more confidence you have. And so, you know, what oftentimes happens that I've seen is you go to organizations that are weak, and by weak I don't mean not, you know, I mean weak in the sense of they don't have strong ticket demand. They oftentimes have the smallest ticket staffs. It's like, it's so counterintuitive to me. And so, you know, you can pay a kid in the U.S. $25,000, you know, add a few $1,000s in benefits and pay him 5% commission, and every one of them will pay for themselves 3 to 1. And yet we kind of are fixed in this model of I need 10 sales reps or I need 20 sales reps. In our model where I've been, it's just like, it's just a curve. It's just how many can I possibly jam into a room? And when I fill the room, I'll give up my conference room. And when I fill up my conference room, I'll plow through to the closet. And we flew through the closet, I'll throw our VP out of his office, because it's just math, right? And so for tickets, it's like once you have that army of ticket sellers and you have a database and you have a real active training kind of regiment in, our chief revenue officer is over there, Chris Heck. He's one of the best guys in the world. And I can tell you, like, the army that he's built in Philadelphia and the one we'll build in New Jersey will give you confidence then to know that, because it's, you know, without, you know, it's like, it's just supply and demand, right? And you're trying to hit that curve. And when you hit that curve, okay, that means you don't sell out. It's just basic economics. So you maximize revenue by not selling out. So the only way you get there is to have the army then to fill behind it. Because when you raise prices by 59%, in some of the cases we raised them like 600% in certain seats, like if that person doesn't renew and they're just like, you just priced me out, I've got to have an engine to come and fill them behind. So I think the combination of all those things makes it work. I would just add, I'm involved with this company called Score Big, which is it's on the other end of the spectrum. Deals with remnant inventory, which is really interesting. So there's like billions and billions of dollars in the U.S. of unsold seats, and they took the opposite approach of a StubHub or secondary market, and they're saying to companies like us, Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils, like, you know, give us 500 seats a game and let us use our digital marketing to go out and kind of create a blind, like a Priceline type blind auction to sell them. And they're moving seats every game. They have like relationships with a very high percentage of the 4 sports leagues. And so you're seeing, like, I think, like, great ingenuity in the ticket space on both sides, on kind of the digital ticketing execution. I think you're seeing it in the secondary market where there's a lot of action, a lot of money, and now with Score Big in the remnant space. And you think about, like, for us sitting here at this time, like, we're going to look back at this time we're in right now, 10 years from now, and wonder what the hell we were doing and how we did business back then, because we just didn't have the toys and tools. And, like, I'm so bullish on the opportunity kind of going forward in this business to get more sophisticated, to get smarter, to kind of attract the type of talent you can, so you can have the data analysis you actually need.
We're coming very close. I think we're already slightly out of time, but maybe time for a couple of questions. Yes? Anybody have a question? Yeah, right here up front.
Yeah, Toby Hester from
There's your mic, Toby, coming right behind you. Here you go.
Toby Hester from Castrol BP. Very interesting. I started my career in sponsorship peddling baseball in the UK, going around trying to get sponsorship for the British Baseball Federation, who told me that back in the 1930s they used to fill football stadiums in the Midlands, a place called the Baseball Ground in Derby, which has now been pulled down, and Nottingham. They regularly used to get 30,000 people there. So I was very interested to see, and I understand now, why baseball has never been pushed in the UK by the NBA. And I see that as because the league doesn't see it as an interest. The teams might do, but the league don't. Contrary to the NFL, that have come in and actually have resurrected their boom, which they had in the 80s here, where you had over 400 teams playing in the UK following the explosion of the fridge and Chicago Bears and stuff. It was phenomenal, and I actually ended up playing it quite badly. But my interest is really in the NBA, because if I look at NBA, they have a role in I talk about Britain here, they have a role in British sport. Every kid picks up a basketball at some point through the schooling here. And I'm actually amazed that the NBA haven't actually exploited that opportunity and brought over teams and really, really worked it. I know they're doing it occasionally now, but they've never really exploited the opportunity of basketball in this country.
That's a good point. I'll tackle a little bit. Last night I was in Manchester because we were playing the Oklahoma City Thunder with Kevin Durant. So We had a near capacity crowd up Manchester. This year, I believe there are 2 regular season games at the O2. Last year, there were 4 regular season games, I believe, at the O2. We have an office based in London, we meaning on behalf of the NBA. I think there are 10 people in this office here. And I will tell you, like, when you look at the statistics, like the raw facts and the research, I would say that we're way over-indexing in London and the UK versus what the opportunity would suggest. And so it acts as a home base, and we love the market, and there's good commercial opportunities here. But I think that if you really take a look at how much the league is invested in the UK, you might change your opinion.
Okay. On the baseball side, we did a couple of things at the team level, to your point, not in the UK, but we took the Orioles to Cuba and played a historic game. We're the only sports franchise to ever play a game in Cuba, and we brought the Cuban team. We did that more as a people-to-people thing to try and transcend the U.S. policy on the embargo and travel ban and so forth, which was something that we had a personal interest in trying to move that along. But we also, our team was the point team in helping the Greek Olympic Committee to put the baseball program together. Greece, as the home country, had to field a team. They don't play baseball in Greece. That's inevitably happens in every Olympics. So teams like ours have tried to do some things like that. And I think to the extent the league's coming around to that, they're certainly, the league has done plenty of all-star events in Japan, Asia, where they think there's a lot of natural commonalities, but I don't think there should be any limitations on that. And getting back in the Olympics, and which baseball sort of walked away from in favor of doing the World Baseball Classic to create some content for the MLB network and whatnot. Domestically, that's a partially successful strategy. Internationally, I don't personally think that's the strategy. I think the strategy is, you got to be in the Olympics, and that's where baseball belongs. It has been. So I think the UK aside, I think all boats rise internationally as you get back in the Olympics and you start to take your teams and take your brands. The Yankees, if the Yankees should be coming to the UK and playing a game here, just as one example, we should come too. But certainly these brands that are iconic, need to be participating internationally.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I want to thank you guys. I want to again thank RepUcom for sponsoring the event today, and thank all of you for being here. Thanks. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Good job.